The debate is over and in the history books between former President Donald Trump and former presidential candidate Joe Biden. It looks like it may be over for the Joe Biden campaign because just about everybody can see it was a disaster for the Biden campaign. We got a lot to cover. We are not going to show clips here because I think they're taking them down because CNN does not want anyone else talking about this because it's so bad for their candidate. All right, friends, let's jump into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and these are the things that the mainstream media won't tell you. CNN, MSNBC, and all these other mainstream media channels have come out, and they are circling the wagons like nobody's business. They're saying that Joe Biden won the debate. Oh, no one's saying that. Interesting. No one is saying that. Now, they're trying to game the system a little bit here and be like, well, among swing voters, we think that Joe Biden, that Trump failed to reach out to them and this and that. But nobody is out there claiming that Joe Biden won this thing. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We're going to go over some quotes here. We're going to go over kind of some of the moments that are going to live in our minds for a while. I must admit, I was a little trepidatious about watching this because recently debates have gotten so awful. And so surprisingly enough, they actually had a civil conversation most of the time. It devolved at a couple points into name calling and such, but both of them got into it, so it's not one or the other. But this was a complete Joe Biden experience. It had creepy whispering. He was creepily whispering most of the time. Donald Trump was speaking normally, and Biden was like whispering, what you gotta know about the... I can't do a good impression of it, but just, the creepy whisper. Yeah, did a lot of that. Lots of lies that everyone's going to be out there Googling for the next few days here. And Joe Biden, interestingly, talking about family members getting raped. That was one that Donald Trump did not swing at, but probably better that he didn't. The laptop was brought up and said to be, you guys lied about that. It turned out to be true. It was the real deal. Joe Biden didn't even touch that one. We got Joe Biden having some verbal slip-ups out there, talking about he started getting rambly and didn't know what he was saying, and then eventually he said something along the lines of beating Medicare. We've been beating Medicare, which Donald Trump said, yeah, that's exactly right. That's the first thing you said right today. You are beating Medicare. You're shoving millions and millions of illegals into Medicaid and Medicare and onto Social Security, which will destroy it. And Joe Biden just kind of didn't really have anything to say about that. He rambled on to basically my favorite little bit was Joe Biden was rambling incoherently about his failure to secure the border. It was like literally 30 seconds, I kid you not, of like mumbling, murmuring, and nobody could understand what he was saying. Just random words here and there that really weren't tied together on things. It was absolutely insane. And then it was just like, they looked over at Trump because it was his turn to speak. And Trump's just like, I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I really don't think he knows what he said either. And then he just, because how can you respond to somebody that you don't even understand what they're saying, right? He was just kind of rambling and just kind of trailed off, kind of like, I hope nobody notices that I don't really have anything to say here. It was moments like that. I will say that the absolutely rambling, incoherent moments were under a dozen times. There were a few, though. There were a few, and that one was like the longest. It was just, what? I mean, absolute insanity. I mean, it was so bad that actually, when CNN kind of cut out of it, they're starting their commentary, their spin doctoring of the debate. And we see this like in the background, it's Joe Biden with Jill EDD on the stage there. And he's just kind of like doing the robot kind of thing, kind of like, like he was doing at the G7, just like wandering away kind of thing. And Joe Biden had to grab him by the arm and hold him as he took the 2 steps down the stage. The 2 steps. I mean, he was feebly going down the steps with her assistance kind of thing. And that was just like in the background when he was coming off. And that's with him all hopped up on the drugs that they had him on. He had some really big verbal slips between trillions. He said there are thousands of trillionaires, and then he went into, then he corrected himself, billionaires. And then the next moment he said something in millions, and he's like, in billions. He just mixing up his millions, billions, and trillions, because that's what you want in a president. Someone who has a firm grasp on whether this is $100 trillion or $100 million, because they're basically all the same. They're big numbers, right? We had, at one point, the moderator, the CNN folks, asked Biden directly to defend, whether he was too old and how to respond that he was, not able to do his job. And so he defended his cognitive impairment. I kid you not. This was his defense. Back when I started 50 years ago in politics, I'm sorry, friends, but if you want to defend your cognitive impairment by saying that you've been in politics for 50 years as a politician, that's not going to connect with a lot of people, I don't think. But that was his defense. Basically that he was accused of being too young 50 years ago when he started in politics. And so therefore, that was ridiculous. Moving on. And he doesn't even say anything more about it. Donald Trump, when asked basically the same question, he said that basically that he's taking cognitive tests and he did really well on them or whatever, and that he feels good. He talked candidly about his physical, health and such, which was interesting. Just politicians don't do that usually, but he did kind of share some of that. But Donald Trump just brought the slammers home on a lot of occasions throughout this evening. We had one of my favorites was when Donald Trump asked Joe Biden if he had fired anyone for Afghanistan, the absolute disaster of a withdrawal. Donald Trump said he called the Afghanistan withdrawal one of the most, actually I think he said the most embarrassing moment in American history. And if you don't remember, the people clinging to the wheels of the airplanes as they took off and the people falling off the aircraft while in flight. It was a disaster. 13 American soldiers were killed at the gate. And then Joe Biden responded to that. The Taliban gave the Americans the location of a terrorist. The Taliban gave him the location of a terrorist. And without verifying it, they bombed the target. Turns out it wasn't a terrorist, but rather a humanitarian aid worker with his family that the Taliban wanted to eliminate. And they suckered Joe Biden into dropping a bomb in retaliation for the American servicemen being killed. He retaliated against one of our allies, one of the people that was helping us to stabilize Afghanistan, and his family. Trump asked Biden if he fired anyone for the Afghanistan debacle? Silence. He asked him if he fired anyone for the border debacle. Silence. Joe Biden at one point wanted us to believe that not one single terrorist. Now, we're not going to listen to what the Border Patrol says, because the Border Patrol has listed hundreds of people on the terror watch list caught crossing the border under Joe Biden's presidency. But he claims that not one terrorist has crossed the border under his administration. He also claimed that his son died in Iraq, which is not correct. Not correct at all. We have a lot of stuff happening in this. At one point, Joe Biden claimed on the border, he said that the Border Patrol has endorsed me, Joe Biden. When Donald Trump got the chance, he said, no, the Border Patrol has never endorsed you, Joe Biden. The Border Patrol has always endorsed me. And when it came back to Joe Biden, he said, well, the Border Patrol maybe hasn't endorsed me, but, and then went on to ramble about something. He got called out on a lie, and he backpedaled like a politician, like nobody's business. He was beating the truth just like he's been beating Medicare. And Donald Trump really drove home hard. Afghanistan withdrawal being the worst moment in the most humiliating moment, embarrassing moment in American history. He really drove home how the millions and millions and millions of people coming across the border are being put on Social Security, being put on Medicare, being put on Medicaid, and how it's going to collapse those. I would say that it was rather effective. When you looked at the two people up there, you saw zombie Biden, and you saw an active and engaged and considerate Donald Trump. Now, there was one point where they started calling each other names, and that was not great. It ended as Donald Trump said, let's not act like children, which was, at least he recognized what was happening right there, because they were starting to devolve into that. But it was night and day. We had these memorized, it was, one of the things that was so clear to me through this whole debate was how Joe Biden had memorized his answers. And they weren't generalized answers either. I kid you not, CNN gave them the questions beforehand. Like, I have no question in my mind. And you know why I know that? There was a clip at the very end, Joe Biden's closing statement, which was so canned. It was so clearly canned. And yet, in that canned conclusion, it clearly referenced several of the questions. Several of the questions that Joe Biden never answered in the debate. How could he not register the questions in the debate, particularly the one on child care tax credits and stuff like that? He didn't say that in the debate. He got sidetracked because Donald Trump was going after him on the previous question or whatever, and so he got sidetracked too. And so he never really answered the question. Donald Trump never really answered the question either. So it's just kind of like neither one of them answered the question right, and they were just kind of going back and forth. And then in Joe Biden's canned, clearly memorized conclusion, he references that question about the child care tax credit that he's proposing, which in the debate he didn't propose. Where did that come from? I'll tell you where it came from. They had the questions from CNN. They used it to formulate the perfect canned response for the conclusion, and then they presented it to him, had him memorize it, and then he spat it out. Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, CNN fed Biden the answer, the questions beforehand. They were able to poll test all of their answers on different things. And you can just hear so many times Joe Biden was repeating a canned answer, especially to the questions. When he got the question directed at him, he had a canned response. He starts going 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I know public speakers can do that. They can figure that out. He didn't stop and think about it. He didn't write down some notes down below before he started speaking. He just knew the points off the top of his head. How in the world did that happen? You don't see him looking up. What was it? Up and left is to think about. If you think about, I guess up and left is what I'm naturally doing right there. He doesn't do that. He does more of a recollection, look down, recollection of what his talking points are before he goes on. One point he's playing with his ear too. Some people speculate that he may have had an earpiece in, which might be possible. I don't know. But much of what he said, and how do you know it's canned, right? Because as he's stumbling through it, he misses words. As he stumbles through it, he misses words. And as he misses those words, what he's saying doesn't make sense anymore. And that's what happens when you memorize something and you're kind of just, you're keeping with the cadence of it and you're delivering it, but then you miss this word or whatever. When you're making something up or when you're speaking out, it's much easier to make it make sense because as you're speaking, you're listening to yourself. When you've memorized it, you're not listening to yourself, you're listening to what you're repeating. Like if you memorize it off of audio, you're memorizing it based on what you heard or the recordings of yourself saying it or the previous versions of you saying it. You're listening to your memory, not to what's coming out of your actual mouth. And I saw that on numerous occasions with Joe Biden. So my conclusion on that matter is that I clearly saw it was canned responses. That's why it took 7 days of practice in seclusion to prepare for this debate. He was memorizing all the answers to all the questions because they had the questions beforehand. Now, that's a pretty bold accusation, and yet I guarantee it's the case. Because after the debate, you didn't see the CNN people going up and shaking the hands of Donald Trump, but you did see them going up and shaking the hands of feeble old Joe. And that is the truth. All right, friends, it was a devastating loss to Joe Biden. Talk out there on Twitter and elsewhere is already ramping up for the replacement of Joe Biden. He was not up to the task of a debate, and people are asking, like Donald Trump, whether he's up to the task of running for president and being president right now, let alone 4 years into the future. Let me know what you guys think of the debate down below. What were your favorite moments? What points kind of stood out to you? What really jumped out to you? Because there was a lot of stuff that happened there. And if you didn't watch it, hopefully this was a good summary of it, so you don't have to watch it. But if you're leaning more towards Donald Trump, if you watch it, I think you will find it relatively enjoyable. But the fingernails on the chalkboard whenever Joe Biden is sitting there spinning his little tall tales was just ridiculous. The one time that Joe Biden just came to a screeching halt, just stuttering mess, and the moderators actually cut him off to have like a break, and they started asking a question that took a while to ask the question, and you could tell they were stalling because Joe Biden's decay on that answer was so bad that they were trying to cover for him. It was absolutely ridiculous. All right, friends, let me know what you thought down in the comments down below. I know this is an update video. Update video will come out this afternoon, but I know everyone's talking about this and wanting to talk about it, so I wanted to jump on that right now. Thanks so much for watching. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.